Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book review from the Give Yourself Goosebumps series, and it's book number 29, Invaders from the Big Screen. Now, I feel really bad about this because I read this book like 9 to 10 months ago to review on the channel, but I got wrapped up in a lot of things. I actually read 2 other books along with this, and I just put it off, and I never made the video, and I forgot the whole book. So I decided to play catch up recently and reread this so I can make a review. And this is one of those times that this is going into the review with a second time lens after having to reread something because I forgot to make the video for it. And I'm kind of glad I did because I caught a few irritations that I don't think I caught the first time reading it. With that being said though, I do think that this book has a lot going for it, especially for what type of story it is. In Goosebumps, you just don't have books centered around movie theaters. And movie theater horror is something that I've been wanting from this series for a long time. And having this kind of fulfills that itch to scratch, because in almost every single horror IP, especially in the kids' horror realm, there is a movie theater themed story for the most part. You can find one. There's one in Spine Tinglers. Are You Afraid of the Dark has one or two. You know, the list goes on. This is Goosebumps' answer to that. Now, does it live up to the hype? This is one of the more popular GYG books. I'd say kind of. You know, it does have its clear flaws, in my opinion, that weigh it down. But do I find this book good? Yeah, I'd recommend this. If you haven't tried movie theater horror in the kids' horror subgenre, this would be a good place to start. If you haven't tried Give Yourself Goosebumps before, this also might be a good start. So take that, you know, with a grain of salt, or, you know, weigh it heavily on my recommendation, whatever you choose to do. But go try this book, okay? So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So, in Give Yourself Goosebumps books, you need to understand one thing. You are the main character. Every decision that you make facilitate where you go in the story and what's going to follow because of what decisions you make, and so on and so forth. And the setup to this book is very unique to a lot of Give Yourself Goosebumps and Choose Your Own Adventure stuff that I've been acquainted with. Most of the time in Give Yourself Goosebumps, you have 2 main arcs. You get to a certain point early on in the story, and you go down 2 distinct paths. However, in this book, the way it lays out the paths is very unique. From page 1, almost immediately, you have the option of going into 3 different movies, all different themed and what have you as well, to pretty much play through. Well, I say play very loosely because you're not really playing this book, you're just more so reading through the arcs. But that was a very well-invited change of pace the first time I read it, and coming back to it, I really enjoyed it the second time around. So pretty much you and your best friend Laura head to your local megaplex in town, and you two just want to see a movie. And Laura's like, hey, let's not see anything scary, and whatever you choose shall be fine with me, right? So you have 3 options. The first option that's given to you is The House of the 100 Horrors. The second one is Agent Z versus Dr. Aqua. And the third one is Going Ape in Blastovision. And when I read through this time, I went through just the list order. So if you pick The House of 100 Horrors, your friend Laura's upset with you, but you have gritty anticipation going into the theater with her. The movie will be in 3D, so you gather 3D glasses from this lady in the lobby, and you head into the movie theater, and you prepare to watch the movie, and you realize that you're pretty much the only people in there, and you kind of wondering why nobody's in there. And as a reader, you're kind of like, okay, so 2 13-year-old kids, let's just say, or right under 13, just go see a horror movie. Okay. Especially when you see what's put into the story, you might be like, okay, well, You put on your 3D glasses and the movie starts playing, and you see this image of these two twins looking for presumably their aunt, known as Aunt Kitty, and you and your friend Laura get sucked into this movie, right? Kind of like Wizard of Oz almost. And you end up in this movie and you lose your 3D glasses and you have nowhere else to go and you start wandering around this house that the movie takes place in, and you end up finding these two twins that you saw on screen earlier. And the twins are asking you to help them find their Aunt Kitty. Meanwhile, when you meet up with them, you're in like this hallway of portraits, and the portraits are saying, hey, you should not trust these twins. So you pretty much have a delineation point from this arc moving forward. You either trust the portraits and you don't trust the twins and you try to stay away from them and find Aunt Kitty independently to rescue her, or you get to work with the twins and you go through the whole arc down that path with them. So if you go down the arc where you try to avoid the twins, essentially you realize that the twins possibly are vampires and like sadistic killers, and they've killed a couple people that they've recruited to come help, rescue Aunt Kitty, right? So you try to navigate this house. You have a couple endings implying bad endings where you encounter the twins and they get the best of you and stuff. I don't want to go into too many spoilers, but there are some pretty tense endings with these twins, I should say. But the true ending to this arc is actually a bad ending. You end up finding Aunt Kitty, and Aunt Kitty may or may not be the person you should have been running from the whole time. Yeah, that's pretty much that side arc. But the arc that leads to the true ending for this, I would say, is if you help the twins find Aunt Kitty, right? And you go through these rooms in this house. There's a room where you go into this thing called the Helter Skelter drawer, and there's options you could pick, and there's a very graphic ending of what happens to your fingers and your hands and getting locked inside of this drawer. But if you pick the right path, you get to go through this weird like torture chamber device that leads you up this staircase, and you get to pick 3 different options. I think one of the options is you get to like play music. The other one is you get to play portraits, and another one is something else. I forget exactly what it is. But the first 2, the one I'm forgetting and the one with the music, they kind of tie together. And if you end up getting to a part with this piano in this room, easily one of the most graphic things I've ever seen done in a Goosebumps book. Let's just say the piano has teeth for keys, and what happens to your hands is grisly. But that was great stuff. But the last path with the portraits, you end up, either helping paint the eyes on one, or, leaving it alone and trying to maneuver somewhere else, right? And you end up in this room with like spinny tops and stuff, and one of the tops like mind controls everyone around you and even your friend Laura. So they end up like pretty much murdering you. So yeah, this arc has a lot of dark endings, right? But if you manage to navigate through the tops and you get out of the room, you end up finding Aunt Kitty, and you end up rescuing her, and she's glad that you made it to her, and she ends up giving you what you need to get out of the movie, and that pretty much wraps up that arc. Moving forward, every arc, the end goal is to find your 3D glasses or glasses involved with the movie to escape the film and end back up in real reality, right? So, when you're done with that arc, the second arc is the Agent Z versus Dr. Aqua arc. And this one is, I think, the shortest one of the whole book. But essentially, if you pick this one, you and your friend are excited to see Agent Z and his newest installment. He's kind of like a James Bond ripoff. And you go into this room. It's a packed audience. Everybody's here to see this blockbuster. And you're just frothing at the mouth. And when the movie starts playing, Agent Z rides in on like a jet ski, and Dr. Aqua's there waiting for him, and there's an explosion. When this explosion happens, it kind of rips through space-time continuum and causes the theater to start flooding. Everybody in the theater starts panicking and leaves, but you and your friend Laura realize very quickly that you're going to be subjected to having to deal with this Dr. Aqua character who has escaped the movie. So this is the part where you have to pick two different options. One option is you get to stay and deal with Dr. Aqua in the real world. And the second option is that you get to help Agent Z in the movie deal with Dr. Aqua. Somehow Agent Z chases Dr. Aqua back into the movie, let's just say. Now, if you choose to fight Dr. Aqua in your reality, you shortly realize that if you stay in the theater, you're going to hit a bunch of endings, and you get to deal with these side characters called Humanigators that are kind of like mutant toadies to Dr. Aqua. And you get this sense that this flooding machine from this movie is going to take over the theater and potentially take over the rest of your town. Now, if you choose to stay in the theater, like I said, you're going to be stuck there and you're going to hit a couple of dead ends. But if you decide to chase Dr. Aqua out of the theater, you do end up in a couple situations. And let's just say there's no real solid good ending for this side arc. You're pretty much forced to go to these two locations, like a laundromat or a TV store, and Dr. Aqua ends up winning and presumably taking over the real world. But if you help Agent Z in the movie to take care of Dr. Aqua, this will take you down to the true ending. So if you follow Agent Z into the movie, you get brought to like this cement area, and he tells you to essentially help him deal with Dr. Aqua, and you, Laura, and Agent Z have to pretty much go straight to Dr. Aqua's base and deal with him there. And there's a bunch of different side plots, and it's very easy to spoil this one because, like I said, this is the shortest one. But let's just say there's a plot involving the flooding machine that I already mentioned, right? And you have to put a stop to it in order to pretty much allow Agent Z to get close to him and to defeat him to, in the movie, fix the ripple in reality and send you home. And that's essentially what you're going to expect out of this. There are some side plots where you end up picking the wrong way in the lair and you get a couple close calls with the Humanigators. But still, kind of like with the reality one, the biggest thing you'll see in this arc is, especially with the endings, involve you pretty much getting stuck in a room full of water or about to be eaten by the Humanigators. That's like either or. And that's pretty much all you're going to get out of the endings for this and the side arcs. But if you manage to pick the right choices, you help Agent Z defeat Dr. Aqua, and he gives you his sunglasses that, in this one, for some reason, you just instantly teleport back into reality, and yeah. So there's that. And then the last one is going ape in Blastovision. And if you go down this arc, this one had a really fun setup, right? So this is like a 4D amusement park type of experience where you and your friend Laura, you get these 3D glasses handed to you by this sketchy theater worker, and you end up in the movie and you're all by yourself, and you have to wear seat belts in these seats because it moves around and sound like vibrates with you along with the movie, which I thought was really fun. But you realize very quickly that the movie is not what you're expecting. There's this giant gorilla that's supposed to be like a King Kong ripoff, shaking, your seats, and you feel like you're about to vibrate out of your seat. And your friend Laura is getting panicky and wants to leave, but you decide to put on the 3D glasses, and you coach Laura to do it with you. And all of a sudden, you get transported into pretty much nothing at first. And then you take off your glasses, and you realize that you're in the movie, and you don't know how you got there, but you're in like this jungle with a bunch of like tropical animals everywhere, and there's this giant gorilla with giant feet coming after you, like King Kong essentially. And you hear some gunshots off in the distance, and you're like, okay, where is the story going to go? And essentially, if you have ever experienced anything with Tarzan, it's like if you took King Kong and Tarzan and put it into a blender. There's this hunter guy that needs your help to catch this giant ape, right? And you can either help him or don't. And if you don't help him, surprisingly, you can get to a true ending this way, or one of them. This is one of the stories that have, essentially two. If you don't help him, you do come across some endings where you pretty much get trampled to death, or squished to death, or eaten by some jungle animal associated with the ape chasing you, or the ape itself. And that's kind of generic and boring. Nothing in this really sticks out to me. But if you help the hunter has established these traps, right? And at one point you kind of question if you should trust them. If you decide not to trust them, you go on this little side tangent where this might have been in another part, but you're like swinging from vines like Tarzan and trying to scale down trees. Or you get like poison ivy, and then you realize that you still need the hunter's help, and that when the hunter helps you, you still have to go through this whole arc, right? So, yeah, essentially, the point of this arc is you help the hunter capture the ape. But if you, like I said, if you don't help the hunter, you get this true ending, right, where you end up having a conversation with the ape because he can talk, and he's like, I'm tired of being the villain, and the ape wants to come back to the real world with you, and you can bring him willingly or unwillingly, and you still get, two totally different outcomes, but a similar ending, right? But if you help him, you defeat the giant ape causing havoc in the movie, and the hunter has found your 3D glasses that you dropped earlier when you were scared of him, when you heard the gunshots, and you get to leave the movie and go back home to a normal life. And that's essentially what you're going to expect out of Invaders from the big screen. The reason why I went so vague with this book specifically in this review, normally I would go more into depth, but the problem with that is that since this book is setting up 3 distinct arcs, it spreads itself very thin because it's the average page length of these books. So if I go into too much detail, it's going to spoil all the fun. it will just spoil all the fun. And there is fun to be had here. So I try to keep it as surface level as possible, okay? So, with that being said, Invaders from the big screen. Let's start off with positives, because I do have quite a few here. What I love about this is the concept alone. And sometimes it's kind of hard for me to separate something from me absolutely loving the concept and then loving the story itself. And I've been at fault with that in the past, I feel. Here, I dig this concept so much when you just hit the ground running. You just pick a movie and you and your friend Laura just go experience it. I like it, right? I think that the House of 100 Horrors arc was genuinely dark, especially for Give Yourself Goosebumps standards, but in Goosebumps in general, some stuff that happens in here, I didn't even mention one of them, but one of them involves literally you and your friends getting sliced and diced on page. It is graphic. It's not really bloody, but the book, the endings in this arc, go there. I mean, there's grisly body harm that happens to characters in this arc. It's incredible. Now, I will say that if you're a fan of like vampire stuff and you don't really feel like you get much of that in Goosebumps, you get some vampires in here, even though it's more of like an accent than anything. But I do dig some of the endings involving the vampires in this arc too. Everything about this, I would say, when it comes to the endings, is pretty much perfect and spot on for what this story is trying to go for. And this one also had an added flair that the other stories didn't, and that is a picture function. There's one page in this whole book that relates to this story, and it has like a picture of some piano keys, and you have to decipher a code on it. If you pick the wrong decipherment, you get a bad ending. That was the one I was telling you about, the teeth and the fingers. that was kind of fun and kind of a different thing to take in with the story. So I think that was easily the best story. Um, Jumping over to Going Ape and Blast Division, right? I think that there are some things I skimmed over because I don't want to ruin all the fun. But let's just say there's some like in-book cameos from other arcs going on here that I thought was kind of fun. I want you to experience that for yourself. But that caught me off guard. I genuinely had a fun time when those things were going on. And that's about it for for that arc. I like the setup to it. I thought the setup was really fun. Probably the best setup of the whole book. I like the idea of going on a 4D movie. So there's that. And Agent Z versus Dr. Aqua. This one, out of all the stories, shockingly, I would say that I would have loved to see this as a full, like, regular book in, like, Series 2000 or something from R.L. Stine. Because this gives me Dr. Maniac versus Robbie Schwartz vibes, but this is, like, the better concept of that. I would rather see a book around, Stine just comes up with the name of a character and their best friend Laura. They go to a megaplex to see a movie. They're seeing this movie, Agent Z versus Dr. Aqua, but they go Last Action Hero with it. If you've never seen Last Action Hero, it's a 90s movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger about a kid that goes to a movie, and the movie comes to life, essentially, and he gets to experience like a movie realm, and then the movie character that he's a fan of gets to experience the reality realm. That could have been the concept of this, and I would have totally dug it, and you could have had an over-the-top villain like Dr. Aqua trying to take a movie villain scheme and bring it to the real world with like this flooding machine. It could have been like a very atmospheric story about, and it could have played on like, had the humanigators trying to kill and eat people. You could have had the fear of drowning being brought up for the main character. Maybe he's afraid of drowning, and that gets brought out through the character. But the potential I see is like maybe the main character in Laura breaking through to Agent Z, that he's just a movie character. I mean, there's so much you can do with the idea. I think that would have been a perfect book, like I said. But here, for what it was trying to go for, I dig its style. It's a James Bond spoof. There's a lot of fun gadgets and really creative ways to set up how you're going to end up in the story. There's a scene involving televisions with Dr. Aqua and the reality part of the arc that is very reminiscent to a book that came later on called Don't Scream from Hall of Horrors. And I thought that scene in that book was really well done. But here, it's for how quick it is, it's pretty much done to the same effect. And I'm like, wow, they did this concept way before Don't Scream. So that caught me off guard. And I just thought this one was a very fun action-focused story for what it was as well. There's some disbelief you got to put at the door, with certain characters. And there's like, there's some parts of the arc where you're breaking kind of the fourth wall with being in a movie. You're dealing with like stunt doubles of the movie. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of fun as well. There's little moments like that just add up in here that I really love. So there's that. But if I had any negatives, I don't think I mentioned this in the plot overview, but I'll mention them over each arc because I think this would be the easiest way to explain this, right? And I'll start off with the least egregious one for me, which is House of 100 Horrors. The problem with this arc is that there's many times where you have alternate choices, and you'll come across this in every single Give Yourself Goosebumps book. You reach a page and you have 2, 3, maybe 4 options to choose from. But in this arc specifically, there was like 3 or 4 instances where you go to pick the alternate option and it takes you to the page you're supposed to go to, but then it reroutes you to the other option because the book's like, hey, you should have picked this option, right? And that just kind of cheapens the purpose of having 2 options. I think this is pretty much done for padding for this arc, and I can kind of see padding being an issue in all 3 of these stories, if I'm being honest. The problem I see with them swinging for the fences with 3 stories, and I think House of 100 Horrors kind of got it the most on the brunt end of this, is that when you're trying to, instead of doing 2 arcs at 138 pages, give or take, right? That's like, 69 pages of story? Here, you're cutting that down even further. So it's like 40 something pages of story. So they have to kind of make the arc a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller, and I guess the cheapest way to introduce main you know pages with different choices is just to reroute them to one choice, and that really frustrated me with this arc, and I did not like that. So that was a glaring negative I had with it. Agency versus Dr. Aqua, I wouldn't say had that similar issue, but the main problem was you had all these dead end arcs that ended pretty quickly when you started them, and most of the endings, I think, are just kind of the same thing. There's a couple of instances if you go into the movie instead of staying in reality where you encounter the Humanigators and you pretty much get the same endings with the Humanigators. That was kind of frustrating. And then when you're in the reality, almost every ending involves you drowning. And that's it. I mean, there's nothing else going on with these endings. It's very repetitive, and it's just not that exciting, right? And the story itself, if I'm being honest, there's for a Give Yourself Goosebumps book, I think that what could have helped this one is having more of a game function, or maybe having you pick up an item that might play a role into if you decide to pick it up or not in the finale fight with Agency and Dr. Aqua. But there's none of that. You're just pretty much reading story, and but it's not the worst thing ever. But since you're propping it up like that and you're barreling through a lot of things, not explaining anything going on in the movie wise, you don't really know what this thing is, like this flooding machine, but you just kind of have to go along with it for pace. It's kind of jarring. And then I think the biggest one for me, the biggest negative, is going Ape and Blast Division. This one is pretty generic. There's nothing creative going on here. It's pretty much every trope and cliche done in like a Tarzan, Man of Jungle type of story and King Kong like creature story. There's nothing new here. And the endings, for the most part, you have some pretty cringe ones, especially with the talking ape parts of the arc, and getting trampled to death, or generically eaten by snakes in a goofy way. It's just really cringe. I really don't have much else to say for Going Ape and Blast Division. It's nothing remarkable whatsoever. I actually think this is kind of meh, if I'm being honest. Was not really impressed with this, and it's the cover of the book. Right? In my opinion, they could have just saved Agency and Dr. Aqua for like a Series 2000 book and just fleshed this book out with Going Ape and Blast Division and House of 100 Horrors. They could have added more of a game function or map function. When you're in the jungle, right? You would think that there could be a map function going on, but there's not even any of that going for it. It's just straight up story. And there's padding, like I said, going on. You have to put some disbelief at the door about what's going on in the plot. There's some fourth wall breaking stuff with characters coming in from others, from other arcs and other paths that you could have chosen in the first page of the book. It's more of a big old miss. This movie choice for me was. So, with that all taken into account, what do I think of this book overall? Well, if I'm being honest, the ambitious 3-arc thing was really welcomed by me, but seeing it done in execution, this could have been a special edition book if they wanted to keep this concept. I think the special editions are like 30 to 40 pages longer than this. I think that having each story at 60 to 70 pages worth of content could have helped flesh out the story a little more. Maybe introducing a game function for the overall premise and concept of the book could have been refreshing too. And each arc has its own different game function. Like you have a map going for Going Ape and Blast Division. You have maybe items you pick up in Dr. Aqua, Agent Z, whatever it's called. And then for House of 100 Horrors, maybe you can have like trivia when you come into a room to prevent yourself from getting eaten or something. I don't know. But this could have benefited from that, whatever the case may be. So the issues I have it added up. And I wanted to give this, originally when I first read it, I was thinking like around a 4.1, but after rereading it, I think I might settle on a 3.9 and deduct 1.1 points off for pretty much all the issues I had with all three arcs combined. The least egregious one was House of 100 Horrors, and I think Going Ape and Blast Division really puts the nail on the head for me. Yeah. But still, a 3.9 out of 5 is a C+. This is a good book. I highly recommend it if you haven't tried it before. I know it's a fan favorite. I think I'm being very generous with my score, given what I thought of it. So, yeah. That's my thoughts on Invaders from the big screen. Let me know down in the comment section if you've read this before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.